Is that a Hello Kitty toy from your daughter's collection? Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez stood blocking the path, his tattooed arms crossed over his chest like a wall of muscle, staring at the shocking pink Barrett 50 caliber rifle with utter disdain. The laughter of 30 Marine Force Recon members echoed across Camp Pendleton Range at 0700 hours on Saturday morning. Rachel Mitchell stood there, 28 years old in a simple gray t-shirt that had seen better days, old military pants still bearing dried mud stains. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the bright pink rifle down on the metal table, not trembling from fear, but the rhythmic shaking that Master Sergeant Jake Sullivan, standing nearby, recognized immediately. Combat tremor, the telltale sign of nerve damage. "Yo, Madison!" Lance Corporal Tyler Webb shouted, phone already raised and recording. "Barbie Sniper is here. Get this on live stream now." Corporal Madison Brooks, her blonde hair perfectly tied under her cap, sneered, "This one probably got lost from the yoga studio." Rachel said nothing. She just looked down the range toward the targets at 6,000 meters, where the Pacific fog hadn't fully cleared yet, then began assembling her rifle with slow, careful movements. But there was something in the way her trembling fingers moved, precise, certain, as if the tremor was part of a deadly dance. And in less than 20 minutes, the laughter would die completely. Every single voice would fall silent. The morning air at Camp Pendleton carried the sharp scent of gun oil and ocean salt, a combination that usually energized the Marines during their monthly qualification shoots. But today, the atmosphere crackled with something different, the electric charge of mockery about to meet reality. Rachel pulled her equipment from the trunk of her beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, each dent and scratch on the vehicle telling its own story of hard times. Hold up! Rodriguez stepped forward, his 6'4" frame casting a shadow over Rachel's 5'6" figure. The former MMA fighter's biceps, each the size of a normal person's thigh, flexed as he gestured dismissively at her rifle. "You seriously bringing that cotton candy piece of garbage to a Marine range? What's next, unicorn stickers?" The crowd erupted in fresh laughter. Madison Brooks, who'd earned the unofficial title of Marine Barbie with her 50,000 Instagram followers, was already going live. "Okay, family," she spoke into her phone, her perfectly contoured face animated with cruel amusement. "You're about to witness what happens when civilians think they can play with the big boys. This woman just showed up with a pink, I kid you not, pink rifle to a Marine qualification." Staff Sergeant Derek Miller, the range's self-proclaimed weapons expert, pushed through the crowd. His eyes, trained by 15 years of handling military firearms, immediately caught something odd about the rifle's upper receiver. The pink paint wasn't just a coating. It was concealing complex modifications he'd never seen before. But before he could voice his observation, Tyler Webb's voice cut through. $20 says she drops it before she even gets to the firing line, Tyler announced, already collecting bills from eager Marines. "Look at those hands shaking like she's got Parkinson's." Rachel continued her methodical setup, her brown hair with its subtle golden highlights catching the morning sun as she bent over her equipment. Her tremor maintained its steady rhythm, exactly 4.7 seconds between pauses, though no one noticed this precision yet. She pulled out a pair of specialized shooting glasses from her bag, the kind with subtle augmented reality features that most people wouldn't recognize. If you're already feeling that familiar burn of indignation watching someone get bullied for being different, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories of hidden strength reach more people who need to see them. And if you want to support even more powerfully, the thanks button below is an amazing way to help me continue bringing you tales of underestimated warriors. Now, let's return to Rachel, who's about to deliver a shock that will change everything. "Listen up, sweetheart," Rodriguez continued, playing to his audience like a performer on stage. "I'll give you 2 minutes to pack up your Toys R Us special and get off our range. This is where real Marines train, not where Instagram influencers come to take selfies." Master Sergeant Jake Sullivan watched from his position near the ammunition station. Something about the woman's stance bothered him, not in a negative way, but in a familiar way that scratched at his memory. Afghanistan, 2012, a forward operating base under siege. He'd seen someone move like that before, someone who'd saved his unit with impossible shots through a sandstorm. Rachel's fingers found her dog tags hanging inside her shirt, the serial number worn and partially illegible from years of wear. She touched them briefly, a gesture so small most missed it, then looked directly at Rodriguez. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft, but carried an edge of steel. "I'll need about 15 minutes to set up," she said simply. 4 words. No emotion, no response to the mockery. 15 minutes? Madison laughed, her live stream viewer count jumping to 2,000 as word spread through military social media. "Honey, you could have 15 hours and you still wouldn't hit anything past 100 meters with those shaky hands and that toy gun." Tyler Webb, never one to miss an opportunity for mischief, accidentally kicked sand toward Rachel as he moved closer for a better camera angle. The dust cloud hit her face just as she was adjusting her scope. The crowd waited for the explosion of anger, the feminine frustration they expected. Instead, Rachel calmly wiped the sand from her face with the back of her hand and continued working as if nothing had happened. The only sign she'd even noticed was a slight adjustment in her breathing pattern. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Combat breathing, Sullivan recognized. Who was this woman? "I've seen some desperate attempts for attention," Derek Miller announced, his expertise finally getting the better of his judgment to stay quiet. "But this takes the cake. That rifle... Hold on, is that upper receiver custom machined? That's not factory standard." "Who cares about the receiver?" Rodriguez interrupted, not wanting to lose his audience's attention. "Barbie here probably had it painted pink at the same shop where she gets her nails done." He turned back to Rachel. "Tell you what, I'm feeling generous. I'll make you a deal. You hit a target, any target, at 1,000 meters, and I'll let you stay on my range. Miss, and you pack up and never come back." "Deal?" Rachel looked up from her scope adjustments, her brown eyes meeting Rodriguez's with an intensity that made him unconsciously shift his weight. The tremor in her hands continued its precise rhythm. 6,000 meters, she said quietly. The laughter stopped as if someone had thrown a switch. Then, like a dam bursting, it exploded even louder than before. Marines doubled over, some actually falling to their knees in mirth. Madison's livestream chat exploded with laughing emojis and comments about delusional civilians. 6,000 meters? Rodriguez wheezed between laughs. "Lady, the world record is 3,500 meters, and that was set by a Canadian Special Forces sniper with perfect conditions and specialized ammunition. You're not just crazy, you're mathematically impossible crazy." Elena Vasquez, a young lieutenant and West Point graduate, moved closer to get a better view. Unlike the others, she'd noticed something the pink paint was trying to hide. The rifle's barrel wasn't standard length, and there were additional mounting points that suggested integrated systems far beyond anything in the Marine inventory. "Actually," Derek Miller tried again, his technical mind refusing to let go of what he was seeing. "Those modifications on her rifle. I've never seen anything like that. The barrel harmonics alone would..." "Nobody cares about your nerd analysis, Miller," Tyler Webb interrupted, eager to maintain the mockery momentum. "Let's talk about the real bet here. Barbie thinks she can shoot 2.5 times farther than the best sniper in history. I say we make this interesting." The crowd pressed closer, phones recording every moment. Rachel continued her setup with mechanical precision, each movement economical and practiced despite the tremor. She pulled out a small notebook from her pocket, its pages filled with calculations and wind charts that looked more like advanced physics equations than standard ballistics tables. "Here's the deal," Rodriguez announced, his showman instincts fully engaged now. "You hit a target at 6,000 meters, which you won't, because it's impossible, and I'll tattoo Barbie on my forehead. You miss, which you will, and you record a video apology for disrespecting women in the military by coming here and wasting our time with your delusions. Deal?" The crowd went wild. Phones captured the moment from every angle as Rodriguez held out his massive hand for a shake. This was social media gold, a delusional civilian about to be humiliated by a Force Recon Marine. Rachel looked at the outstretched hand, then at the targets barely visible in the distance. The tremor in her hands paused for exactly half a second, something only Sullivan caught. She reached out and shook Rodriguez's hand, her grip surprisingly firm despite the shaking. "Deal," she said, her 5th word of the morning. Madison's viewer count hit 5,000. Oh my God, family, she actually shook on it. This woman just signed up for the most epic fail in military history. Carlos is going to destroy her. Place your bets in the chat. How far will her shot even go? As Rachel returned to her rifle, She pulled out a small metal case from her bag. Inside, barely visible, were specialized rounds that Derek Miller immediately recognized as experimental. The serial numbers on them started with DARPA EXP, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency Experimental. His blood ran cold. "Sarge," he whispered urgently to Rodriguez, "those aren't civilian rounds. Those are—" "Not now, Miller," Rodriguez brushed him off, riding high on the crowd's energy. "Can't you see we're about to witness history? The shortest shot in long-range history." Rachel slowly put on her specialized glasses with augmented reality capability originally developed for F-35 pilots, integrating thermal sensors and real-time ballistic calculations. The anti-shake coating, borrowed from space program research, provided absolute image stability, even with hand tremors from nerve damage, technology worth millions now simplified for special operations. The glasses weren't obviously high-tech. They looked like regular shooting glasses to the casual observer. But Sullivan noticed the subtle way data flickered across the lenses, the way Rachel's eyes tracked information invisible to everyone else. 10 minutes, Rodriguez announced. Princess has 10 minutes to set up for her impossible shot. Then we get to watch physics prove what we already know, that cotton candy rifles and shaky hands don't mix. The betting pool had grown to over $5,000, with odds running 100 to 1 against Rachel, even hitting paper at 6,000 meters. Tyler Webb was taking a video selfie with Rachel in the background, narrating her final moments of dignity to his followers. But something strange was happening in the crowd. The laughter was becoming forced, uncertain, because Rachel Mitchell wasn't acting like someone about to fail spectacularly. She was methodical, calm, precise. Every adjustment to her scope was deliberate, every calculation in her notebook done without hesitation. Sullivan moved closer to Colonel Patricia Hawkins, who had just arrived to oversee the monthly qualification. "Colonel," he said quietly, "that woman is using Phantom Protocol." Hawkins' eyes sharpened. "That's impossible. Phantom Protocol is classified beyond top secret. Only 12 people in the world know that shooting method." "I'm telling you what I'm seeing," Sullivan insisted. "The way she's calculating windage, the scope adjustments, even the rhythm of her breathing. That's Phantom Protocol, or I'll eat my stripes." "Wait a minute. Did you notice how she's calculating trajectory? There's something very strange here. Drop a comment below if you caught that unusual detail, or share if you've ever been underestimated because of how you look. Meanwhile, Rodriguez is about to make a challenge he'll regret for the rest of his life. Rodriguez strutted to the front of the crowd like a prize fighter entering the ring. "All right, Marines, let's make this official. 6,000 meters. That's 3.7 miles for those of you who skipped math class. To put that in perspective, that's like trying to hit a target from here to the other side of base, with a rifle, through wind, fog, and the Earth's rotation. Don't forget gravity," Derek Miller added, unable to resist the technical input. "At that distance, bullet drop would be—" "Shut it, nerd," Tyler Webb interrupted. "We get it. It's impossible. That's what makes this so funny." Rachel had moved to the shooting position, kneeling with practiced ease despite her age showing slightly in the careful way she protected her knees. The tremor in her hands maintained its perfect rhythm as she made micro-adjustments to her rifle's position. She pulled out what looked like an ordinary water bottle, but took a careful sip of specialized electrolyte formula developed by Military Medical for extreme snipers, balancing hand tremor and increasing focus under pressure. The formula optimized for neural function during combat stress. Technology from the SEAL Team 6 enhancement program helped control heart rate and tremor during critical life-or-death shots. 5 minutes, Rodriguez announced. 5 minutes until we see the most spectacular failure in Marine Corps history. Madison, you getting all this? Every second, Madison confirmed, her phone steady despite her excitement. 10,000 viewers now, family. You're about to witness what happens when civilians don't know their place. But Elena Vasquez had moved to where she could see Rachel's notebook over her shoulder. The equations there weren't standard ballistics. They included variables she'd never seen before, atmospheric lensing calculations, Coriolis effect compensations taken to the 10th decimal place, and something labeled Project Mitchell Offset that made no sense. Lieutenant, Captain James Harrow appeared at Elena's shoulder. The 38-year-old officer had been watching from the command post, initially dismissive but increasingly intrigued. What do you make of this? Sir, Elena whispered back, those calculations, they're not from any manual I've ever seen. She's accounting for variables we don't even track in sniper school. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, and for just a moment, the tremor stopped completely. Then it resumed its mechanical precision. She loaded a single round into the chamber, the metallic click somehow audible despite the crowd noise. The serial number on the cartridge caught the light. DARPA XP 0007. 2 minutes, Rodriguez called out, but his voice had lost some of its mocking edge. Something about the way Rachel moved, the absolute certainty in her actions despite the shaking hands, was beginning to unnerve him. This wasn't how delusional people acted. This was how professionals acted. The fog was lifting from the range, revealing the distant targets. At 6,000 meters, they were barely visible even with spotting scopes. The crosswind indicators showed gusts up to 15 knots, challenging conditions for a 500-meter shot, let alone 6,000. Hey, Tyler Webb called out, still playing to the cameras. Maybe we should call medical now. You know, for when she dislocates her shoulder from that 50-cal recoil, those shaky hands won't absorb much impact. Rachel's only response was to settle deeper into her shooting position. The tremor in her hands synchronized with her breathing pattern. In, pause, out, tremor, in, pause, out, tremor. Sullivan watched in fascination as she turned a disability into a rhythm, a weakness into a timing mechanism. 1 minute, Rodriguez announced. The crowd pressed closer, but military training kept them at a safe distance from the firing line. Last chance to back out, Barbie. No shame in admitting you bit off more than you can chew. For the first time in 10 minutes, Rachel spoke. Clear the back blast area. 6 words now. Each one delivered with the kind of calm authority that made several Marines unconsciously step back before catching themselves. Rodriguez laughed, but it sounded forced. Back blast? Lady, that's a rifle, not a rocket launcher. You've been watching too many movies. But Sullivan was already moving people back. He'd heard that tone before, seen that kind of preparation. Whatever was about to happen, his instincts screamed it would be significant. Hawkins noticed his movement and followed suit, her command presence causing others to shift position without question. 30 seconds, Rodriguez called out, his showman's instincts warring with a growing unease. The woman hadn't responded to any mockery, hadn't shown any emotion, despite the public humiliation. She just prepared with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Rachel made one final adjustment to her scope, the movement so small only Derek Miller caught it. His technical mind raced. She'd just compensated for thermal layering in the atmosphere, something that only mattered for extreme distance shots. No civilian should even know about thermal layering, let alone how to calculate for it. 10 seconds, Rodriguez announced. The crowd fell silent despite themselves. Even Madison lowered her phone slightly, caught up in the moment. Rachel's breathing slowed. The tremor in her hands continued its perfect rhythm. She found the natural pause between tremors, that half-second window that came every 4.7 seconds. Her fingers settled on the trigger with the lightness of a butterfly landing. 5, 4, 3, 2. The world held its breath. 30 Marines, dozens of phones, thousands of viewers online, all focused on this single moment, the impossible shot, the shaky hands, the pink rifle that had become the joke of the morning. Rachel's eyes, visible in profile, showed no emotion, just focus. Complete, absolute focus that seemed to bend reality around it. The fog parted as if commanded. The wind died for just a moment. The earth itself seemed to pause in its rotation. 1. Time slowed to a crawl. Sullivan saw it first, the way her trigger finger moved between tremors, the perfect synchronization of breath and heartbeat. Hawkins caught the slight shift in her shoulder, micro-adjustments for recoil that hadn't happened yet. Derek Miller watched the rifle's barrel, seeing harmonics he'd only read about in theoretical papers. The trigger broke. The sound that followed wasn't the sharp crack of a normal .50 caliber discharge. It was deeper, more complex, as if the rifle was singing rather than shooting. The muzzle blast was visible in the humid morning air, a perfect cone of compressed atmosphere expanding outward. But it was what happened next that defied explanation. The rifle barely moved. No brutal recoil slamming into Rachel's shoulder. No violent buck that should have sent a small woman with tremoring hands flying backward. The pink rifle absorbed the energy like it was nothing, dampening systems working in perfect harmony. Rodriguez's mouth fell open. "What the f—" "Trajectory tracking," Derek Miller whispered in awe, his eyes following the vapor trail that shouldn't exist. "That's impossible. You can't track a bullet at that distance." But there it is, clear as day. 8.7 seconds. That's how long a bullet takes to travel 6,000 meters, accounting for deceleration. 8.7 seconds of absolute silence as 30 Marines watched the impossible unfold. Even Madison's livestream chat had gone quiet, 10,000 viewers holding their collective breath. Rachel remained perfectly still in her shooting position, the tremor in her hands the only movement. She didn't need to look through the scope to know what would happen. She'd made this shot before, in conditions far worse than a foggy California morning. Through the spotting scopes, they saw it. The steel target at 6,000 meters, a piece of armor plating that would stop conventional rounds even at close range, suddenly sprouted a hole dead center. But that wasn't the truly impossible part. "Holy mother of—" Sullivan breathed. The bullet had continued through the first plate, and the second, and the third. By the time it stopped, it had punched through 5 separate steel plates, each one rated to stop 50 caliber rounds. The kind of penetration that shouldn't be possible with any conventional ammunition. The range fell into absolute silence. Not the expectant quiet of anticipation, but the stunned silence of people whose worldview had just been shattered. The pink rifle that had been a joke 60 seconds ago had just performed a feat of ballistics that rewrote physics textbooks. Rachel slowly stood up, her movements careful and controlled. The tremor in her hands continued its rhythm as she engaged the rifle's safety. She still hadn't looked at the crowd, hadn't acknowledged the impossible shot she'd just made. "That's—" Rodriguez's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "That's not possible. The physics don't work. The math doesn't add up. 6,000 meters through 5 plates? That's not possible." It was Tyler Webb who broke first. His phone slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering on the concrete. The sound seemed to release everyone from their paralysis. Phones lifted, fingers frantically typing, videos being shared with captions that no one would believe. Here's the moment where everything changes. If this is giving you chills, share this video with someone who needs to see that true strength comes in unexpected packages. Because the revelation coming up will flip everything you thought you knew. But the real shock was yet to come. As Rachel bent to pick up her expelled brass casing, evidence of the shot for those who doubt the video evidence, her gray t-shirt shifted. The movement was small, just enough to reveal something on her back through the thin fabric. Sullivan saw it first. His sharp intake of breath was audible in the silence. "No, that's not... It can't be." The shirt settled back into place, but he'd seen enough. A tattoo, partially visible through the fabric. Not just any tattoo, a specific design that had been burned into his memory during classified briefings about operations that officially never happened. "Colonel Hawkins," he said urgently, his voice carrying despite the whisper. "She's got the mark. Phantom 7. Hawkins' face went white. "That's impossible. Phantom 7 died in Kandahar 5 years ago. The whole unit was wiped out. I read the after-action report myself." "Then explain what we just saw," Sullivan countered. "That shooting protocol, those calculations, and now the tattoo. Colonel, we're looking at a ghost." The crowd was starting to recover from their shock, voices rising in confused discussion. Madison's livestream had exploded, 20,000 viewers and climbing, the chat scrolling too fast to read. But she'd lowered her phone, the reality of what she'd witnessed overwhelming her social media instincts. Rodriguez stood frozen in place, his massive frame somehow looking smaller. The bet, the tattoo, the public humiliation he'd orchestrated. It all seemed insignificant compared to the impossibility of what had just happened. His Marines were looking at him, waiting for leadership, for explanation, for anything that made sense. But it was Derek Miller who moved first. His technical mind had been racing since the shot, putting together pieces that the others had missed. The modified rifle, the experimental ammunition, the shooting protocol that shouldn't exist outside of classified facilities. He walked slowly toward Rachel, his hands carefully visible and non-threatening. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, all mockery gone from his voice. "That upper receiver modification, It's not just custom work, it's Project Lightning Glass, isn't it? The electromagnetic rail assist that DARPA said couldn't be miniaturized? Rachel looked at him for the first time, her brown eyes assessing. The tremor in her hands never stopped, but something in her posture shifted. Defensive to neutral, she was listening. The ammunition, Derek continued, his excitement overcoming his caution. DARPA Experimental Series 7. Tungsten carbide penetrators with a classified propellant that burns twice as long as conventional powder. That's how you maintain velocity over 6,000 meters. But the recoil suppression, how did you manage that? The physics say... The physics, Rachel said quietly. Assume conventional materials. Her longest statement yet. 7 words that confirmed everything Derek had theorized. This wasn't just a modified rifle. This was a weapons system that represented a leap forward in ballistics technology, something that defense contractors would kill to reverse engineer. Everyone back the hell up! Rodriguez's voice cracked like a whip, his leadership instincts finally overcoming his shock. This is still an active range. Webb, police those phones. Nobody posts anything until we figure out what just happened. Miller, secure that brass casing as evidence. But it was too late for containment. The videos were already spreading across military social media. Marine Force recon humiliated by civilian woman. Pink rifle shoots impossible distance. 6,000-meter shot, real or fake. Captain Harrow stepped forward, his authority adding weight to Rodriguez's orders. You heard the gunnery sergeant. This range is now restricted. Lieutenant Vasquez, contact base security. We need a perimeter established. The Marines moved with trained efficiency, but their eyes kept drifting back to Rachel. She stood quietly by her rifle, making no move to pack up or leave. The tremor in her hands was more visible now that she wasn't shooting, a constant reminder of some past trauma. Sullivan approached Hawkins, speaking low enough that only she could hear. Colonel, if she's really Phantom 7, if she's really who I think she is, then we've got bigger problems than a lost bet. Explain, Hawkins ordered, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. Phantom 7 wasn't just killed in action. They were betrayed, sold out by someone high up in the command structure. If one of them survived, if she's been out there for 5 years with that kind of tech and those kinds of skills, then someone's going to come looking for her, Hawkins finished, and they won't care about jurisdiction or civilian casualties. As if summoned by her words, a distant sound became audible. Helicopters. Not the steady thrum of military transport birds, but the distinctive rotor signature of modified aircraft, the kind that didn't appear on flight plans or radar screens. Rachel's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the horizon. For the first time all morning, she showed emotion. Her jaw tightened, her hands clenched despite the tremor. She knew that sound, knew what it meant. Everyone inside the range building, she said sharply, authority ringing in every word. Now. The Marines hesitated, looking to their chain of command, but Sullivan was already moving, his combat instincts triggered by the urgency in her voice. You heard her? Move! This is not a drill. Since when do we take orders from civilians? Tyler Webb protested, but his voice lacked conviction. The approaching helicopters were getting louder, and their flight pattern was all wrong. Too low, too fast, too direct. Since that civilian just did something impossible and knows something we don't, Harrow snapped. Everyone inside. That's an order. The orderly movement became a rapid tactical withdrawal. Marines grabbed equipment and weapons, moving with practiced efficiency toward the reinforced range building. But Rodriguez remained frozen, staring at Rachel. Who are you? He asked, all traces of his earlier mockery gone. Really? Who are you? Rachel looked at him, and for just a moment, her professional mask slipped. He saw exhaustion there, and pain, and a weight of secrets that would crush most people. Someone who should have stayed hidden, she said softly. Someone who made a promise I couldn't keep buried. The helicopters were visible now, black shapes against the morning sky. No markings, no identification numbers. Ghost birds carrying ghost passengers, coming for a ghost who'd made the mistake of stepping back into the light. The range building's reinforced walls suddenly felt too thin as the helicopter rotors grew louder. Rachel Mitchell moved with purpose now, the tremor in her hands not slowing her efficiency, as she quickly field-stripped her pink rifle and packed it into a custom case that had been hidden in her Honda Civic's modified compartment. Everybody away from the windows, Sullivan barked, his Afghanistan instincts in full gear. Those aren't standard military birds. Madison, kill that live stream now. Madison Brooks fumbled with her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers shaking as she ended the broadcast. But 25,000 viewers had already seen everything, and the chat was exploding with theories about black helicopters and government conspiracies. Rachel pulled the encrypted satellite phone from her bag, a device that looked decades old, but hummed with hidden technology. She dialed a 20-digit number from memory, her fingers steady despite the tremor during the precise moments between shakes. "Phoenix, this is Pink Death," she said quietly, using a call sign that made Hawkins and Sullivan exchange shocked looks. "They found me. Camp Pendleton, Range 7. How many? 3 birds, probably full teams." She paused, listening. "No, I'm not running again. Not this time." Rodriguez had recovered enough to start thinking tactically. "How many shooters are we looking at?" Rachel ended her call and looked at him directly. "Each helicopter carries 8 operators. Figure 24 total, minus the flight crews. They're not here to arrest me. They're here to clean up a mess." "What mess?" Captain Harrow demanded. "Me," Rachel said simply. "And now, unfortunately, all of you." Derek Miller's analytical mind was racing. "Wait, if you're really Phantom 7, if you really survived Kandahar, then the official story is a lie," Rachel cut him off. "My entire unit was betrayed by our CIA handler, sold out to insurgents for money and political gain. I was the only one who made it out, and only because Robert Mitchell—" her voice caught slightly. "Because a good man jury-rigged an experimental weapons system to buy me time." The helicopters were circling now, standard containment pattern, no loudspeakers demanding surrender, no identification of authority. That told Sullivan everything he needed to know about their intentions. "Range 7 has an underground tunnel system," Elena Vasquez said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "What?" "I studied the base schematics when I was assigned here. Cold War-era bunkers connected by maintenance tunnels. If we can reach the north access point—" "They'll have thought of that," Rachel interrupted. "These aren't amateurs. They're Shadow Division, CIA's deniable ops unit. They'll have every exit covered." "So, what do we do?" Tyler Webb asked, all his earlier bravado gone. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to—" The lights cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. The sudden shift from morning brightness to crimson twilight was disorienting, exactly as intended. "EMP pulse," Derek said. "Localized to this building. They're isolating us from base communications." Rachel moved in the red light like she was born to it. She pulled what looked like an ordinary first aid kit from her gear, but inside were items that definitely didn't come from any medical supplier. She quickly assembled something that looked like a small radio, but hummed with an energy that made nearby hair stand on end. "Colonel Hawkins," she said formally. "In about 60 seconds, men in black tactical gear are going to breach this building. They'll have no identification, no warrant, no legal authority. But they'll have orders to eliminate everyone here to protect a secret that's already spreading across the internet. You need to make a command decision." Hawkins straightened. "Marines don't abandon civilians to be murdered by rogue intelligence operatives. Even civilians who lied about who they were?" "You never lied," Sullivan interjected. "We just made assumptions. You showed up with a rifle to shoot. Everything else was our prejudice." The first breach charge detonated on the north door. Marines reacted instinctively, taking defensive positions with whatever weapons they had. Most had only their sidearms, having secured their rifles in the arms room. But 30 Force Recon Marines, even lightly armed, were not to be taken lightly. Rachel pulled out the specialized ammunition from her case, but these rounds looked different from the ones she'd used for the distance shot. These had red tips and warning labels in languages that didn't exist in any public database. "Rodriguez!" she called out. "You still wondering who I am? This really isn't the time for—" "Staff Sergeant Rachel Mitchell, Phantom Team 7, she said formally, her voice cutting through the chaos. 127 confirmed kills in Iraq, Afghanistan, and operations you'll never hear about. Youngest operator ever inducted into the program, specialist in impossible shots and deniable operations. The main door exploded inward. What happened next would be debated in classified after-action reports for years. 30 Marines with sidearms and tactical knowledge faced off against 24 Shadow Division operators with superior equipment and the element of surprise. But the Shadow Division hadn't counted on Rachel Mitchell. She moved through the red-lit space like a force of nature, her pink rifle reassembled in seconds. The tremor in her hands vanished during the critical moments of each shot, that 4.7-second rhythm becoming a deadly metronome. The experimental rounds she fired didn't just penetrate body armor. They disrupted electronic systems, shorted out night vision, and created localized electromagnetic pulses that turned sophisticated gear into dead weight. Rodriguez found himself fighting alongside the woman he'd mocked and discovered that everything about her had been deceptive. Her small stature let her move through spaces he couldn't fit. Her apparent weakness had hidden a lethality that took his breath away. And that pink rifle he'd laughed at? In her hands, it was death incarnate. "Northwest corner, 2 shooters," Rachel called out, her voice calm despite the chaos. Her next 2 shots dropped both targets before Rodriguez could even turn his head. Madison Brooks, pressed against a wall with her phone still clutched uselessly in her hand, watched Rachel work with a mixture of terror and awe. This wasn't the trembling woman she'd live-streamed. This was a predator, moving with purpose and precision through the tactical nightmare. "Reloading," Rachel announced, and Sullivan automatically moved to cover her sector. They'd never trained together, but the language of combat was universal among professionals. Tyler Webb had found a rifle somewhere and was laying down suppressing fire with more enthusiasm than accuracy. But even his spray and pray technique was helping, forcing Shadow Division operators to move more cautiously. "Flash bang," Derek Miller warned, recognizing the distinctive sound of a pin being pulled. Rachel's response was instantaneous. One of her special rounds intercepted the grenade mid-flight, the collision causing both to detonate harmlessly in the air. "How?" Derek breathed. "Practice," Rachel replied, already tracking new targets. The battle raged for 6 minutes that felt like hours. Shadow Division had expected to sweep in, eliminate witnesses, and extract without significant resistance. They hadn't expected Force Recon Marines defending their ground. They definitely hadn't expected Rachel Mitchell. When the smoke cleared, literally and figuratively, 14 Shadow Division operators were down. The rest had retreated to their helicopters, their mission parameters blown beyond recovery. On the Marine side, several were wounded but none critically. Rachel's covering fire and impossible shots had kept them alive. "Medic!" Harrow called out, immediately shifting to casualty management. Marines moved with trained efficiency, treating wounded and securing the building. Rachel slumped against a wall, the adrenaline fading. The tremor in her hands was worse now, the nerve damage aggravated by the intense action. She looked at her pink rifle with something like sadness. 7 rounds left, she said quietly. Rob would be proud. His ammunition design worked perfectly. "Rob?" Elena asked, moving to check Rachel for injuries. "Robert Mitchell, my teammate. Rachel's voice caught. "He designed the rifle system. The pink color was his idea of a joke. Said if I was going to be the only woman in Phantom, I might as well own it. He was working on revolutionary ballistics when we were betrayed. Died getting me the prototype." Sullivan approached with a field medical kit. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her hands. Rachel nodded, and he began wrapping them with practiced care. "Nerve damage from torture?" 72 hours, Rachel confirmed. "They wanted the location of Rob's research. I never gave it up. CIA decided I was a liability after I refused to terminate civilians in Kandahar. The betrayal was their way of cleaning house." "Bishop," Hawkins said. It wasn't a question. Rachel's head snapped up. "You know about Bishop?" "Handler Marcus Bishop. Disappeared 5 years ago after several operations went sideways. Suspected of selling operational intelligence. We could never prove it." "I can prove it," Rachel said grimly. "I have everything. Documents, recordings, financial transfers. It's what I stole before going underground. It's why they've been hunting me." The sound of approaching vehicles, many of them, filled the air. But this time, it was the familiar rumble of Marine armor. Base security had finally responded to the firefight. "We need to control the narrative," Harrow said. "This is going to be impossible to cover up." "Don't," Rachel said firmly. "Don't cover it up. That's what they want. Darkness and silence and classified stamps. Put it in the light, every bit of it." Rodriguez knelt in front of her, his massive frame somehow making him level with her seated position. "I owe you an apology, and a tattoo apparently." Despite everything, Rachel actually smiled. A small thing, but genuine. "You don't need to tattoo anything. You and your Marines just stood against CIA death squads for someone you don't even know. That's worth more than any bet." "You're wrong," Rodriguez said. "We do know you. You're a Marine who got betrayed by her country and still showed up to honor a fallen brother's legacy. That pink rifle? That's a memorial, isn't it?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. Rob died believing his work would save lives, make impossible shots possible, give operators an edge that would bring them home. I've been testing it, perfecting it, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. "And you chose our range?" Madison asked, her phone forgotten, her perfect makeup streaked with dust and tears. "I chose Marines," Rachel corrected, "because I knew if things went wrong, you'd fight, even for someone you didn't like. It's what we do." The base security forces arrived with General Patricia Morrison, a two-star who happened to be on base for an inspection. She took in the scene: wounded operators in unmarked gear, Marines with smoking weapons, and a small woman with trembling hands sitting against a wall with a pink rifle. "Colonel Hawkins," the general said calmly, "I suspect you have an interesting report for me." "Ma'am," Hawkins replied, "this is Staff Sergeant Rachel Mitchell, Phantom 7. She just helped us repel an illegal CIA operation on American soil." The general's eyebrows rose. "Phantom 7 died in Kandahar." "Reports of my death were fabricated," Rachel said, struggling to her feet. Marines moved to help her, but she waved them off. She stood at attention despite the exhaustion, despite the tremor, despite everything. "Ma'am, I have evidence of treason at the highest levels of intelligence services. I've been running for 5 years, but I'm done running." General Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then, in a move that shocked everyone present, she rendered a perfect salute. "Welcome home, Sergeant." Rachel's composure finally cracked. 5 years of isolation, of running, of carrying secrets that burned like acid, it all came crashing down. She returned the salute with shaking hands, tears flowing freely. "The rifle technology," Morrison continued after lowering her salute. "Is it everything the reports suggested?" "Better," Derek Miller interjected, unable to contain himself. "General, what we witnessed today rewrites everything we know about ballistics. That 6,000-meter shot, that was just the beginning. The applications for force protection, for giving our people the edge they need, can be discussed after we deal with the immediate situation." Morrison cut him off, though not unkindly. "Sergeant Mitchell, are you willing to debrief?" "Yes, ma'am, but not in a black site, not hidden away. If we're doing this, we do it officially. Public record, congressional oversight, the whole thing." "That's not how intelligence works," someone said. "That's how it's going to work," Rachel replied firmly. "Or in 6 hours, every document I have goes to the Washington Post, New York Times, and WikiLeaks simultaneously. I'm done with shadows." The cleanup took hours. Shadow Division operatives were processed, their weapons cataloged, their complete lack of official identification noted. Several tried to invoke classified protocols, but General Morrison was having none of it. "You conducted an unauthorized military operation on my base," she told their apparent leader. "You're lucky these Marines showed restraint, or we'd be loading body bags instead of prisoners." Rachel worked with base intelligence to secure the scene, her knowledge of Shadow Division protocols invaluable. She showed them where to look for surveillance equipment, how to disable tracking devices, and what communication channels to monitor. Through it all, Rodriguez stayed close. Not protective exactly, he'd seen her capabilities, but supportive. When her hands shook too badly to write, he steadied them. When exhaustion threatened to drop her, he was there with a chair. "Why?" she asked him during a quiet moment. "Because I was an idiot," he said simply. "And because you could have let us die. Shadow Division came for you. We were just witnesses. You could have run, left us to it. Instead, you fought for people who mocked you. That's honor I can't match." "You matched it when you stood between me and them," Rachel replied. "All of you did." Madison approached hesitantly, her phone nowhere in sight for the first time all day. I wanted to apologize. What I said, what I did." "You did what you thought was funny," Rachel interrupted, not unkindly. "You saw what you expected to see, a weak woman with a silly rifle. It's human nature." "It's horrible nature," Madison countered. "I pride myself on supporting women in the military, and the first chance I got, I tore another woman down for entertainment, for likes. God, I'm disgusting." "You're human," Rachel corrected, "and you're learning. That's all any of us can do." As the sun reached its peak, burning away the last of the morning fog, Investigators arrived from multiple agencies: FBI, NCIS, Army CID. Everyone wanted a piece of the unprecedented situation. But General Morrison ran interference, ensuring Rachel wasn't whisked away to some interrogation room. "She's a Marine who defended Marines on Marine territory," Morrison stated flatly. "She stays under Marine protection until I'm satisfied proper procedures are being followed." The pink rifle had been secured as evidence, but Rachel was allowed to say goodbye to it. She ran her trembling fingers along the barrel one last time, whispered something too quiet for anyone to hear, and then nodded to the evidence technicians. "We'll need you to replicate the technology," someone in a suit said. "I'll consider it," Rachel replied. "After Bishop is in custody and my unit's honor is restored. That could take years. Then you'd better get started." The confrontation had an unexpected effect. Within hours, the live stream footage of the morning's events had gone beyond viral. 25 million views and climbing. The comment sections were battlegrounds of opinion, but one thread dominated: respect for the woman who'd made an impossible shot with shaking hands, and then defended the very people who'd mocked her. Veterans across the country began sharing their own stories, times they'd been underestimated, dismissed, forgotten. The pink rifle became a symbol, appearing on t-shirts and social media profiles. "Don't judge the weapon by its color" became a rallying cry. Tyler Webb had spent the hours after the fight in quiet reflection. Finally, he approached Rachel as she was giving yet another statement. "Ma'am, when you have a minute?" She looked up, noting his subdued demeanor. "What is it, Webb?" I need to... He struggled with words. "I've been thinking about what I did, not just today but always, making fun of people, tearing them down for laughs. It's who I've been, and I hate it. Seeing you, what you can do, who you really are, it made me realize I've been the worst kind of person. And," Rachel prompted, not making it easy for him, "and I want to change. I want to be better. Like you said to Madison, I want to learn. Will you teach me? Not the shooting necessarily, but the discipline, the honor, the ability to stay calm when everyone's against you." Rachel studied him for a long moment. "The tremor in my hands will never go away. The nerve damage is permanent. But I learned to work with it, not against it. That's the first lesson. Your weaknesses can become strengths if you approach them right. Come see me when this is over. We'll talk." By evening, Camp Pendleton was swarming with brass, generals, admirals, senior intelligence officials. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened. The pink rifle had been taken apart and examined by weapons experts who spoke in hushed tones about paradigm shifts and revolutionary advances. Rachel found herself in the unusual position of being the calmest person in rooms full of agitated officers. 5 years of running had taught her patience. She answered questions methodically, provided evidence systematically, and waited for the wheels of justice to slowly turn. "Bishop's location?" an intelligence officer asked for the 10th time. "Encrypted in my files. You'll have it when I have guarantees." "You're not in a position to negotiate." General Morrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. "She's in exactly that position. Sergeant Mitchell has evidence of treason, technology that could save countless lives, and the moral high ground. I suggest you stop treating her like a suspect and start treating her like the asset she is." As night fell, Rachel was finally allowed a break. She found herself on the range where it had all started. Now, crime scene tape and evidence markers. The targets at 6,000 meters were still there. 5 holes punched through steel that shouldn't have been penetrable. Rodriguez found her there, along with Sullivan, Hawkins, and several others from the morning's events. They stood in comfortable silence, processing the day's impossible turns. "So, what happens now?" Elena asked eventually. "Now I testify," Rachel said. "Bishop gets exposed, my unit gets their honor back, and Rob's technology goes to people who need it. Snipers who can make impossible shots to save lives. Operators who can come home because they had the edge they needed." "And you?" Madison asked. She'd been quiet most of the day, the weight of her earlier behavior clearly sitting heavy. "I don't know," Rachel admitted. 5 years of running doesn't just stop. 5 years of being alone doesn't just end. But maybe... She looked around at the Marines who'd stood with her. "Maybe I don't have to figure it out alone." "You don't," Rodriguez said firmly. "You've got a unit again, Different from Phantom 7, maybe less high speed. Definitely more likely to make bad jokes. But we've got your 6. The tremor in Rachel's hands seemed less pronounced as she smiled. Careful, Sergeant. I might take you up on that. 3 days later, Marcus Bishop was arrested at a private airport trying to flee the country. The evidence Rachel had preserved led to 14 more arrests across the intelligence community. The betrayal of Phantom 7 was officially acknowledged, with full honors restored to the fallen. Rachel stood at Arlington National Cemetery, her dress uniform immaculate despite hands that still trembled. The families of her lost teammates stood with her as new headstones were unveiled, their sacrifice finally recognized. Robert Mitchell's stone bore an inscription: inventor, warrior, friend. His legacy lives on in every impossible shot. The pink rifle technology was fast-tracked for development. Within a year, designated marksmen across the military would have access to weapons systems that could save lives by making the impossible possible. Each rifle bore a small plaque: Mitchell Systems, in honor of those who see beyond limitations. Rodriguez kept his word about the tattoo, though not what anyone expected. Instead of Barbie or even respect, he had "Never Judge" inked on his forearm. It became something of a tradition among the Marines who'd been there that day. Tattoos with messages about looking deeper, seeing clearer, respecting unconditionally. Madison Brooks pivoted her social media presence entirely. Her new focus on highlighting overlooked veterans and sharing stories of hidden strength grew her following to 500,000. But more importantly, it grew her as a person. She often credited Rachel with saving more than just her life that day. Tyler Webb threw himself into training with a dedication that surprised everyone. Under Rachel's guidance, she did agree to teach him. He transformed from a cruel prankster into a thoughtful Marine. His journey wasn't easy, but Rachel's patient instruction on turning weaknesses into strengths resonated. Derek Miller led the technical analysis team for the new rifle systems, his expertise finally given the outlet it deserved. He often said that watching Rachel shoot had been like seeing physics rewritten in real time, and he was determined to understand every aspect of how she did it. Sullivan and Hawkins co-authored the after-action report that became required reading at military academies. The lessons learned about assumptions, prejudice, and the danger of judging by appearances were considered as valuable as the tactical analysis. Elena Vasquez spearheaded a program to identify and support female veterans with specialized skills who'd been overlooked or underutilized. The Pink Rifle Initiative helped dozens of women find new purpose and recognition for their service. General Morrison personally oversaw the restructuring of base security protocols, ensuring that no rogue agency could ever again attempt what Shadow Division had tried. She also established a whistleblower protection program, specifically for special operators who'd been burned by their handlers. But perhaps the most significant change was in Rachel herself, the woman who'd arrived at Camp Pendleton alone and trembling, left with a community. The isolation that had defined 5 years of her life was replaced by connection, purpose, and hope. 6 months after the incident, she returned to Camp Pendleton for a special ceremony. The Marine Corps was officially inducting her as an instructor for their advanced marksmanship program. She stood before a formation of Marines, her hands still trembling, but her voice strong. "You're going to hear a lot about the 6,000-meter shot," she began, "about the pink rifle and the impossible physics. But that's not what matters. What matters is that 30 Marines who didn't know me, who had every reason to walk away, stood their ground when it counted. They saw past their assumptions and found their honor. That's the real lesson from that day." She paused, looking at faces both familiar and new. Rodriguez stood at attention in the front row, his "Never Judge" tattoo visible below his sleeve. Madison was there as a civilian guest, recording not for social media, but for history. Tyler Webb, his bearing transformed by months of dedicated training, watched with the intensity of a true student. "I'm going to teach you to shoot," Rachel continued, "to make impossible shots possible. But more than that, I'm going to teach you to see, to look past the surface, past your prejudices, past what you think you know. Because the most dangerous person on any battlefield isn't the one who looks dangerous. It's the one you underestimated." As the ceremony concluded and the formation dispersed, a young female Marine approached hesitantly. She had the same nervous energy Rachel recognized from her own early days in service. "Ma'am," the Marine said, "I have nerve damage from an IED. Docs say I'll never shoot competitively again. But I heard about you, about how you turned your tremor into an advantage. Would you teach me? Rachel smiled, the expression transforming her face. What's your name, Marine? Lance Corporal Sarah Chen, ma'am. Well, Chen, first lesson starts tomorrow. 0600. Bring your rifle and an open mind. We're going to rewrite what's possible. As the sun set over Camp Pendleton, painting the sky in shades of pink that reminded everyone of that infamous rifle, Rachel Mitchell stood surrounded by the community she'd found in the most unlikely place. The tremor in her hands continued its rhythm. 4.7 seconds. Pause. 4.7 seconds. Pause. But now she knew it wasn't a weakness to hide. It was a metronome of survival, a reminder of strength found in the most broken places. The pink rifle itself sat in a place of honor in the base museum. Its bright color a permanent reminder that strength comes in unexpected packages. Visitors often asked why such a garish weapon was displayed so prominently. The docents would smile and begin the story. Let me tell you about the day assumptions died at Camp Pendleton. But the real legacy wasn't in museums or training programs, or even in the revolutionary technology that would save countless lives. It was in the transformed thinking of every person who'd witnessed that day. In Rodriguez's humility, Madison's growth, Tyler's redemption, in the respect earned not through perfection, but through perseverance. 5 years later, at a reunion of those who'd been there, General Morrison, now retired, raised a toast. The room was full of people whose lives had been changed by a single morning's events. Rachel stood among them, her hands still trembling, her spirit unbroken. To the pink rifle, Morrison said, and to the woman who showed us that our greatest weaknesses can become our greatest strengths, who taught us that honor isn't about being perfect, it's about standing up when it counts. To never judging, Rodriguez added, his own career having flourished after learning that lesson. To second chances, Tyler Webb contributed, now a sergeant himself, known for mentoring troubled Marines. To seeing clearly, Madison said, her documentary about overlooked veterans having won multiple awards. To impossible shots, Derek added, holding the patent for innovations inspired by that day. To standing together, Sullivan said, thinking of all the Marines who'd chosen righteousness over easy mockery. Rachel raised her glass with a trembling hand that no longer bothered her. To Robert Mitchell, she said softly, who believed technology should save lives, not end them. And to all of you, who proved that Marines don't abandon anyone, not even someone who shows up with a pink rifle and an attitude. The laughter that followed was warm, inclusive, nothing like the mocking sounds that had started it all. It was the laughter of family, of understanding, of bonds forged in unlikely circumstances. Later that night, Rachel stood once more on the range where it had all happened. The targets at 6,000 meters had long since been replaced, but she could still see them in her mind's eye. The impossible distance, the impossible shot, the impossible day that changed everything. A young Marine approached. There was always someone seeking her out now. Ma'am, they say you can teach anyone to shoot past their limitations. Is that true? Rachel looked at the earnest face, seeing herself, seeing all the Marines who'd been told they couldn't. They weren't good enough. They didn't fit the mold. Bring your rifle tomorrow, she said. We'll find out together. As she walked away, her trembling hands tucked in her pockets, she thought about Bishop, now serving life in federal prison. About Shadow Division, disbanded and discredited. About all the forces that had tried to bury her and her truth. They'd all made the same mistake Rodriguez had made that morning, judging by appearances, dismissing based on surface observations. They'd seen a woman with shaking hands and a pink rifle. They'd missed the warrior underneath. The tremor continued its rhythm. 4.7 seconds, pause. 4.7 seconds, pause. Once a curse, now a blessing. Once a weakness, now a strength. Once a secret shame, now a public inspiration. In the distance, the Pacific Ocean continued its eternal conversation with the shore. Somewhere out there, in bases and camps around the world, Marines were learning that the most powerful weapon in their arsenal wasn't made of steel and polymer. It was the ability to look past prejudice and see potential, to stand for what's right, even when it's easier to laugh along with the crowd, to never, ever judge a rifle by its color, or a warrior by their wounds. The pink rifle had done its job, not just in making an impossible shot, but in shooting down assumptions, piercing prejudice, and punching through the armor of arrogance that too often separates us from recognizing the extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary. Rachel smiled as she drove away in her old Honda Civic, still dented, still scarred, still perfectly functional despite its appearance. Like its owner, it had been underestimated. Like its owner, it had survived everything thrown at it. Like its owner, it carried its wounds as proof of endurance, not defeat. Behind her, Camp Pendleton settled into the evening routine. But in the barracks and offices, in the guard posts and motor pools, conversations continued about the day perceptions died and truth was born. About the woman who'd shown them that sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone dismisses. The story spread far beyond the Marine Corps, becoming legend in military circles worldwide. But for those who'd been there, who'd lived through it, it was simpler than legend. It was a reminder that they'd been given a second chance to be better, to see clearer, to judge less. And in a world full of quick judgments and surface assessments, that might have been the most impossible shot of all, the one that pierced through human nature itself and found the honor hiding underneath. The tremor never stopped. 4.7 seconds, pause, 4.7 seconds, pause. A rhythm of resilience, a metronome of hope, a reminder that our greatest weaknesses might just be our most powerful strengths, if we have the courage to face them, accept them, and transform them into something extraordinary. Just like a pink rifle that could shoot 6,000 meters. Just like a woman who refused to let betrayal define her. Just like Marines who chose honor over mockery when it mattered most. Some shots echo forever, not in sound, but in the lives they change, the assumptions they shatter, and the truths they reveal. Rachel Mitchell's shot that morning at Camp Pendleton was one of those. A pink bullet of reality that pierced through 6,000 meters of prejudice and hit the target of human potential dead center. And the world, for all its flaws and quick judgments, was a little better for it. The pink rifle rests in its museum case, a bright reminder in a world of military drab. The display case itself is unremarkable, standard bulletproof glass with climate control to preserve the historic weapon. But the rifle inside draws every eye that passes. Its shocking pink polymer furniture gleams under the carefully positioned lights, a splash of color that seems almost rebellious among the olive drab and gunmetal gray of the surrounding exhibits. Children point and giggle at its color, pressing their noses against the glass. "Look, Mommy, a princess gun!" a little girl exclaims, her eyes bright with delight. Parents hurry them along, some chuckling at what they assume is a mistake or a joke exhibit. Tour groups pause, confused, wondering if this is some kind of artistic statement or political commentary gone wrong. Adults smirk at its appearance, making the same jokes that Rodriguez and his Marines made that fateful morning. "Bet that's for shooting unicorns?" they whisper to each other. "Someone's daughter must have gotten into the armory with her nail polish." They take selfies with exaggerated expressions of mock horror or amusement, already composing captions about toxic masculinity or military waste for their social media posts. The museum docents have learned to spot the different types of visitors. There are the dismissive ones who barely glance at the placard, the curious ones who read halfway through before losing interest, the skeptical ones who assume the whole story is propaganda or urban legend. But then there are the others, the ones who stop mid-stride when they spot the pink rifle, their whole body going still, the ones whose eyes widen with recognition, who approach the case with something approaching reverence. Veterans mostly, but not all. Some are young Marines who've heard the story passed down like oral tradition. Others are older, bearing the weight of their own underestimations and redemptions. They see something else entirely in that garish pink coating. They see camouflage of a different sort, the kind that hides capability behind appearance, that uses prejudice as a tactical advantage. They see the morning everything changed, when the comfortable assumptions of 30 Force Recon Marines shattered like glass under the impact of truth. They see Rodriguez's massive frame frozen in shock, his mockery dying in his throat. They see Madison's livestream transforming from cruel entertainment to witness testimony. They see Tyler Webb learning in real time that his actions had consequences, that his pranks weren't harmless fun, but weapons of their own kind. When laughter turned to respect, not the grudging respect of the defeated, but the genuine respect of those who've witnessed something extraordinary. when mockery became protection, 30 Marines forming a defensive line around a woman they had tried to drive away just minutes before, when prejudice transformed into partnership, and a shared battlefield erased every preconception that had seemed so important in the morning light. They see a woman with trembling hands and an impossible rifle showing them all what courage really looks like. Not the absence of fear or weakness, but the decision to act despite them. The determination to honor a fallen friend even when it meant stepping back into the crosshairs of those who'd betrayed her. Some visitors leave flowers at the base of the display. Others stand in silent salute. A few have been known to break down in tears, overwhelmed by their own memories of being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. The pink rifle has become a pilgrimage site of sorts for those who have had to prove themselves against impossible odds. 4.7 seconds, pause, 4.7 seconds, pause. The rhythm